can start recording. Okay. You're recording, Sophia?
Mm-hmm.
Recording, Kara? Okay. Recording sound, so...
Wait, there's like a
yeah,
like a
that's okay.
symbol that says like it's like a picture of a camera and there's like a I don't know, it says recording.
Yeah.
But okay, it's on the JPEG thing. Let's see. I just don't know what these new cameras are doing.
Yeah, you.
Because I wrote
I edited it.
No, I can't read.
Cheesy stuff.
Well, I'm not saying
This is
what's.
accolades.
I'm not saying.
Just
I'm telling you.
you said you actually learned these things. What?
Young man, as the father of 4 daughters, you're not going to win.
Yeah, I know.
No, yeah, he's not.
Okay, so whenever you guys are ready, you can start with your introduction and
Okay.
welcome General Becton, and then just go from there and have a comfortable conversation, okay?
Okay. Well, we are obviously Lower Merion students. I'm Courtney Hatton. This is Kelvin and Jenny, and we welcome you to our interview.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Okay. I guess I'll just kind of go right into it. So you've achieved many things in your life, and you rose to the rank of Lieutenant General. You were the director of FEMA and the superintendent of the DC public school system. You obviously are a very influential person. What would you say were your what do you owe your success to?
Oh, several things. I said earlier today, family, with the expectation that they had for my brother and me, mother and father. Place called Lower Merion, because I got the education that helped me to do what I could do. And then meeting a young lady that went to Radnor when I went to Lower Merion, and we got married. As of last January, it was 65 years, so it must have been fairly successful. And those things help to plant the seed for what you want to do.
Going back to your childhood, when you were in high school, I know you said that your family was very, they really stressed education. What were their specific values? What did they might have said to you as a child?
We went to Saints Memorial Baptist Church in Bryn Mawr. My mother was things that mothers do, Mother's Aid, ushers, various clubs that have, and she was very active in church. My father was very supportive, but he went to church for one service, that is the 11 o'clock service, and when the minister finished, that was it for him. My mother, however, made sure we got to junior church, which started at 10:30, through senior church and Sunday school, and then something called BYPU, Baptist Youth Protestant Union, I believe, and then evening church. I got quite a bit of religious education, and I made it very clear with my chaplains when I was on active duty. I think I don't need 6 or 8 hours to be saved. I think you can do it in 30 minutes. Can you not? And so that's the kind of background I came from. I had a healthy respect for it. And our 4 daughters and 1 son are very active in church. Not because we put pressure on them, because they want to do something like that.
Okay. Okay, this is more about your Army background. What was it like returning home from the war? After, I know you achieved many various awards, and they were all listed earlier today, but what was it like coming home and taking off the uniform? Were you treated differently, being more now that everyone knows you?
I did not experience some of the things that some other soldiers may have experienced, of being snared at and having being a target of abusive language. But when I came back from World War II, the war was over. I went off to the Pacific after that, but when I came back, I just came home.
Why
No,
do
simple.
Why do you believe that you weren't the victim of those racial and hateful terms?
Because by the time I came back, the war, what war? It's been that long since the people from World War II, as an example. When I came home, it was in 1946, November. The war was over early 45, so there was no big issue. When I came back from Korea, it's a different story. The taxi cab driver, when he picked me up, and I was in civilian clothes, and where are you coming from? Well, Korea. Korea? You a soldier, baby killer? What are you talking about? But that's what the culture, the atmosphere. Okay, when I came back from Vietnam, we were able to, at least the unit I was in, to do a pretty good job, and we came back as a unit. By the time I got off the plane or whatever it was and went to my home, no big deal. But of the three wars, Korea was the most difficult one for the American public to accept and to treat their service member appropriately.
In 1996, you became the superintendent of the Washington, D.C.
May I ask you, I wear hearing aids, and you got to speak up a little bit so I can hear what you're saying.
In 1996, you became the superintendent of the Washington, D.C. school district. What have you learned to be the most important factor for educational success?
Establishing rapport with the faculty, because I am not an educator per se, having been brought up in teacher college or having been spent time in the classroom. I was brought into the system as a manager, and by not having rapport with the teachers, I got a fighting battle. Since I was able in Washington to give them a pay raise, they have not had one in 7 years, I became a pretty good friend of the teachers. The students, I got along fine with them because I had 5 kids, and they covered the waterfront, the same kind of kids that are in front of me or in the school system. And our 5 kids had been to school in the district at one time. My biggest problem was dealing with something called the Congress. Washington, D.C. is the only school district in the country that has to go to the Congress for money because it's not a state. Which meant that if superintendent here in Lower Merion, he has to convince somebody, a state or a community or township for money, he does not have to go to Washington to appear before the Congress, nor is anyone else besides the school district in Washington. When you have that, and there are politicians keeping in mind, I had 500 and whatever number of politicians we got in the House and the Senate, I think it's 55, who knew my job better than I did. And they were not the least bit reluctant to tell me. I had one case of a subcommittee chairman in the Senate said that he let it be known that I should not be the superintendent. I never met the guy before. And I had my staff, what's he talking about? And I found out that his wife had been a teacher. And she had said, it's just impossible for a soldier to become the superintendent. He shouldn't be the superintendent. We got over that only because a fellow senator, and I mention his name because it's going to be on tape, Chuck Hagel, who is now Secretary of Defense, we were friends. And he was able to get a hold of this fellow senator and say, hey, cut it out. And get back, give him a chance. And we were able to make it that way. But it's a one-on-one personal thing when you deal with members of the Congress. And it's not fun, but it can work.
What skill sets, did you use any skill sets from your military background and apply them to your educational being a superintendent?
I used everything I could. I heard the young man who introduced me, Levon, he read those. It's on 12 points. And every one worked for me. That's from be professional, integrity is non-negotiable, chain of command, loyalty,
It's a two-way street.
admit mistakes, charity, yeah. So that's just show what 87 years will do for you. And the other end is maintain your sense of humor, keep things in perspective. Education, training, et cetera, works. And the one I'm thinking about, I'll think of it before I finish. But I haven't used those thoughts since I left my last job, and that was back in '98. So I can be excused for not being able to come up with them right now.
What was the reason for your major occupational change from a decorated Army soldier with a mathematics degree from Maryland University to a district superintendent?
What make you think there's a change in because the things I did as a systems analyst or mathematician or as an economist, they work in any other job. So what I may have changed is the position which I occupy, but the techniques of getting something done, they work.
They stayed the same. From job to job, they stayed the same.
Name me a job where you don't use mathematics of some type. This is not just counting 1, 2, 3, or algebra, or trig, or something like that, but the philosophy that behind thinking those problems through. That's a mathematical effort. And I hope that your teachers here use that approach, that math is just a way of studying.
Okay. You're gonna
Ebony magazine named you one of the 100 most influential blacks in America. This honor is not just bestowed onto anyone. A man like you changed the school system once you became the superintendent. Would you ever consider reprising the award, even bringing your efforts to Lower Merion?
The answer is no, because I'm 87. And I don't think anybody at that age should be doing anything besides just enjoying his family. And certainly to bring it to Lower Merion, I had to move. And the last time when I took the job as superintendent in Washington, we lived in a place called Springfield, Virginia, about 15 miles from Washington. As I was driving home in my car, I called my wife and said, they want me to be the superintendent of the District of Columbia. And she said, okay. 2 things. If you take that job, don't bring your anger home. And 2, we're not moving. So if I were to go home now and say, dear, we're going to go to Lower Merion and be a da-da-da. And she's going to look at me and she's going to remind me that we got married in 1948. If I want to stay that way, forget about what you for yourself.
How does the election of Barack Obama impact how you feel about the nation's progress towards racial equality?
You should know that I am a registered Republican, and I was one of 37 senior military officers that were advisors to Obama. I think you understand so I supported him whatever he wanted to do. And I think it's very important. And I would hope that his last accomplishment, backing off from dropping missiles, et cetera, on Syria and convincing Putin to get with that character in the Middle East to give up his chemical weapons, works. We cannot afford another war battle where we still got places in our own country that are hurting. Whether we're talking about education, medicine, employment, we have major problems here, to include in Pennsylvania.
You mentioned education. What do you mean specifically? What do you think is the most important factor for closing the achievement gap?
I want to repeat what you said since I asked about speaking up. The most important thing to
For
closing
the
the
achievement
gap. I don't know what they do in Lower Merion Township in terms of getting parents involved. But one of the biggest things, from my background, is making sure that parents have an opportunity to get involved in the education of their kids. And if they don't know how, explain to them how. I think that's very important. The second thing I think is important is for the youngsters to understand they can do anything they want to do if they put their minds to it and get the help they need. But to do that, they have to have the environment in a school that want the youngster to learn. I think from what I've seen, you have a teacher dedication. But interesting enough, when I was a student here, we had not one black American as a teacher in the system. And I have no idea when they got them. But that was not one thing. And they are needed because we need to demonstrate that as role models, things can be done.
Not having an African American teacher.
Say that again?
Not having an African American teacher while you were growing up, did that affect your learning anyway?
No, I think I did fairly well.
Um,
It would have been important, it would have helped me, let's put it this way, to at least be more comfortable in certain areas. But I didn't have a problem growing up in schools. Plus I played football, so we got along well. Plus, we had a winning football team, I might add. Let me point that out just for the record. In the 3 years I was in high school, we lost one game, we tied one, and won everything else.
It's a huge difference now.
Um, I gather from what you're saying that it's not that, really, I do wear hearing aids.
Recently, we renamed our former Minority Achievement Program to the Becton Scholars. In both programs,
Lacey Sanders, please report to the main office.
in both programs, the goal was to challenge our black students and provide a better environment for success. So one of the things that the program kind of focused on was one of the methods was kind of like grouping together our black students so that they can be in the same class for like a better support system. What is your take on like?
Well, let me first make a statement. I found out about the Becton Scholars right before I took my first bite in a sandwich. Like I did not know anything about it.
You're kidding.
No, I'm very serious. As a matter of fact, the parent who mentioned the fact that her child was a Becton Scholar, I said, a what? And then she went, oh, boof. So I'm going to ask you if you can give me a copy or something I can take home to give my family. This is what we're going to do. So what was your question?
One of the methods of the Becton Scholar Program is to kind of like group the black students together in classes to provide for a better support system. Do you agree with that?
I really do. I would not do that if I were the administrator. Because anytime you bring a group of people together, while you may be able to get things done, you got a whole lot of people from the outside who are suspect of what's going on. Are they ganging up on this, or trying to game this, and you're not going to end up in an all-black community, I hope, in what you're doing. You're going to have to survive in a pretty big world out there.
Right.
And I think that by having people of all backgrounds as part of a study group would be far better. I say the same thing in employment. Say the same thing in out in the the outside world. Whenever you have all girls school, all boys school, I would have the same problem.
So what values would you like to see, like, be more, like, what method do you think would work for the Becton Scholars Program to?
Well, you heard me say, I do not know what those things that are
Okay.
listed as the Becton Scholars. And
Well,
I'm sure you're gonna give me a copy of your paper that
Okay.
lists those things.
yeah. uh,
Okay. The achievement gap between white students and minority students has been evident throughout the nation. Even in such a successful school district, we too have an achievement gap. Why do you think that's so?
I think I would take an argument when you say it's true throughout the nation. I don't think that, I think some school districts have demonstrated that achievement gap does not exist from a racial standpoint. I think your military academy can demonstrate that. Naval, Army, and so forth. While it's true across the country in a general sense, there may be places where they overcome that achievement gap, but where you exist in one that is true, recognition of the fact you got one, and then working from that standpoint, find what is it that aptitude-wise who they may be, can or cannot do. And then targeting that, not rather this color of your skin tells the world that you are in this group.
As an effort to close the achievement gap, the No Child Left Behind campaign went into full effect in 2002, under the jurisdiction of George W. Bush. How did this make you feel? Will you change anything about the mechanic to try and lessen the gap?
I had left education before that No Child Left Behind came in. In all candor, I have not taken a hard look at it. I do not know the details of it. I know there is a program deal with No Child Left Behind. So for me to respond to that would be just so many words, because I have not given any great deal of thought to it. Keep in mind, I was trained to be a soldier. But these other things sort of follow behind, to include education.
Right.
Why do you think many Americans and the black community specifically respond so strongly to the Trayvon Martin tragedy? How did the verdict of the trial make you feel?
I think that we're going to experience in the next, some not too distant future, some additional ideas. I saw that Zimmerman's wife is suing for a divorce, that she called in the police because he had threatened her and her father. I think there'll be some attitudes changed as to the law, that maybe we ought to take a hard look at that law, stand your ground, and make some changes there. I would hope so.
Where would you say we are today in terms of racial integration in the nation?
I think we're a lot further advanced in 2013 than we were when I graduated from high school. Of course, that's not answering your question, but I think that we are making progress. When you think about it, we have a black American as President of the United States. We have a black American as Attorney General. It's no longer strange to find a member of the cabinet who is black or Hispanic or Oriental or white. We have in corporate America, I believe the American Express CEO is a black American. You have a window, mental blank. What's Wendell's last name?
Howard. Holland.
you know, as a member of a bank, when I was growing up, any black man I saw working at a bank was sweeping the floor. He's a member of the board. I was a trustee in Valley Forge Military Academy. My son was a first captain at Valley Forge Military Academy. We have family members doing things that were not conceivable 20 years ago. And so I think that as a nation, we're finding out, hey, Black American, Hispanic Americans, I would like to think we'll have eventually just the term Americans, can do the job. And if the prognosticators are correct, that Hispanic would become the largest minority, they may be the majority in so many years, we got a moot point.
You guys ready to wrap it up?
Yeah.
Like three more questions.
You know, they can cut and paste this thing. Okay. I hope they cut some of the things I said out, but they'll.
Do you remember where you were when the March on Washington took place and how it made you feel?
Yep, I was in Verdun, France, as a soldier. My grade was a major, and we felt very, very proud of that. I was also there when Kennedy got shot.
Why were you so proud at that March on Washington?
Why what?
Why did you feel so proud during the March on Washington?
Because one didn't believe they could pull it off, and they did. Getting a racial group doing certain parts of our history to do something together wasn't always the case. There are people who pull it against you can't do that, you shouldn't do that, etc. They were able to pull that one off, and it worked. It demonstrated that the government is supportive of what they're doing. They didn't bring out the 82nd Airborne to stop it from happening. When they brought the 82nd Airborne Division in, it was to protect this community from bad things happening. And I think whenever a group of people, whether you're talking about the miners in West Virginia or talking about the Teamsters Union or any other group of people, when they get together working for a goal that is democratic in background, culture, should work. And we support it.
Where do you see America in 10 years? Where do you see Black Americans in 10 years?
Let's see, I will be then 97. And if I'm still here, I'm not too sure that I will care about what's going to happen. But I got some family members, and I care about what they're doing, and about their opportunities. I just think, I'm optimistic about where we're going as a nation. I think we're going to eventually have people who are smart enough to recognize what should be done and what should not be done. And I saw this morning a member of the Senate from here, Pennsylvania. I saw, in the Pennsylvania Senate that is, I saw a member of the House of Representatives in Washington talking about what's happening in Lower Merion. And that can't help but have an impact on people who hear it or listen to it. So I'm optimistic about where we're going. I have a grandson who is a senior in high school. He's been captain of his football team for 2 years, which is a little bit unusual for a junior. He is a straight A student. He's an exchange student with people in Spain. And he's fluent in Spanish as well as in English. And we have all kinds of great expectations for him, but he also has help. He has a first cousin who's another granddaughter. She's in India right now. She just graduated from Cedarville College in Ohio, and she put aside for 1 year going to law school, UVA. And she's in India, working on international women's issues where bad things are happening to women in India. Would I volunteer for her to do that? Not really, but she wanted to do it, and she did it. And we're proud of her. And we're praying that she gets back in one piece. But we're having people doing things like that, not just in the Becton family, but in other families. It can't help but be good for the country.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for giving us your time, and
Does anyone else have a question? General Becton, I have a question, if you could speak to these
Sure.
young students. You mentioned a couple times you're 87.
Yes.
And
It's a fact, yes.
that's great. Yeah, I'm 42, and it's amazing how much we keep learning the older we get. And I think that it would be helpful for our students today, our students tomorrow, and in the future, for you to share what you believe to be the roadmap to living a successful life. What are some of the things that you've learned through all your experiences that have kept your compass true north, as they say?
Okay, I think first, making sure you got a mate, a spouse that is supportive of what he or she may have in mind. Be honest with yourself and then with that spouse. Doing work that you enjoy doing, that gives you some kind of psychic pumping up. Taking times to relax, because the body can't keep going forever. Avoid doing things that are sinful from a physical standpoint as well as a mental standpoint. Being a role model for the youngsters that you have, kids, or for others. Don't stop learning. Read. Be objective. Get involved in volunteer organizations, not-for-profit organizations. Enjoying life. And have a belief, whether it's personal or collective with your family, but in an almighty God that we all should recognize that he or she is involved in our life.
Thank you, sir.
What else did you want to hear?
Well, I'd like to thank you for taking your time to sit with us. It was very
Hey,
helpful.
I got finished earlier than I thought it would. All right.
I told you it wasn't that long.
Say again?
I told you it wasn't that long.
Well, all right.
Said it was like 4 pages. It was like it's that long, wasn't it?
And I did say there were 4 pages too, didn't I?
Yeah.
okay.